to introduce the other panelists we have for tonight. First is my good friend Terry Glavin, who is a co-founder of the Canada-Afghanistan Solidarity Committee. He's the author of 6 books and the co-author of 4, which range in subjects from anthropology to natural history. He's won more than a dozen writing awards, including the Hubert Evans Nonfiction Prize and the British Columbia Lieutenant Governor's Award for Literary Excellence, and he's now a columnist for the Ottawa Citizen. And the last 4 days, this weekend as well, there's a series by Terry on Syria. So please welcome Terry Glavin. Everybody have a seat. Next up is my good friend David Kilgour. If you go to events around the city on human rights, whether it's for the Tibetans, whether it's for the Vietnamese, whether it's for a monument against the victims of communism, you name the event in this city and David Kilgour will be there. He works tirelessly for every single human rights effort going on. Please welcome David Kilgour. Lastly, my friend Joseph Benamy, a dear friend who runs the Meehan Institute here in Ottawa. He's a terrific intellectual who knows a lot about free speech, freedom of speech, and by the way, he's got a great dinner to go to a couple of days after the festival. So please welcome Joseph Benamy. So first up, anybody want to comment on the film? Any general comments on what you've seen tonight in the film?
You need a second to go first?
Yeah, sure, David. If you want to go first.
Here I am sitting right next to Jacob too. Congratulations, Jacob. Can you hear me back?
Congratulations on your film. It's fascinating. You're an extremely good presenter, and a lot of me agrees with what you said. I noticed you mentioned that you were sorry the Supreme Court of Canada had upheld our hate speech law. Can I just make, I guess, 2 brief, real things I've been through recently. One, in July, I was in Hong Kong, ladies and gentlemen, and we had about 1,000 people gathered to basically walk through the streets of Hong Kong, a Falun Gong community, and there were some people who are known as the Youth Care Association of Hong Kong. They wear green shirts, and they, while we were doing our little speeches, there were quite a few of us, they had the loudspeaker up to the point where the MC was sitting about where you are, Jacob, and I couldn't hear what she was saying. They had the loudspeakers up as loud as they could make them, so they were just, and they were spewing out hate against Falun Gong. You probably know that in China, Falun Gong are imprisoned, they're killed for their vital organs. It is simply barbaric. And it turns out that the Green Shirt Youth Care Association is actually run by the 610 office, which you probably don't know is responsible for the persecution of Falun Gong for 13 years. Now the other one I'd like to mention, and so I mean, that's one of the reasons that I believe in our anti-hate laws in Canada. And the other example I'll give you is, it's 2004, I guess. We had a conference at the University of Alberta. We had people coming from all over the place to talk about cults. Two people in the university, students, Mr. Hall, were giving out pamphlets about Falun Gong. And 2 policemen showed up, and they looked at these pamphlets, and they said, this is violating the anti-hate laws. And the 2 policemen wanted to charge these 2 diplomats from the consulate, Chinese consulate in Calgary, and they were all set to do it. And the Attorney General at the time wouldn't sign he had to sign a consent to the prosecution. And I honestly believe that in a country, multicultural country like Canada, we have to have anti-hate laws, or we would end up with something like I told you about in Hong Kong. And now the other thing that you please jump on me if you don't like this example. It's the hate. It's the idea of shoving
Fire in a crowded theater.
Now, this, to give you an example from, and I should fess up, I'm on the Christian-Muslim dialogue, and but this particular minister you all know about, was it in Florida? Reverend Smith? Was it Smith? Yeah, one of the insisted on burning the Holy Quran, as you know, and even the president asked him not to do it, and I would call that the equivalent of hate, shouting fire in a crowded theater. So maybe that's a good place to stop.
Do you want me to reply, or?
Well, if anybody wants to reply to David's point about the need for anti-hate laws.
I think, you know, the example from Hong Kong, I think there's a big difference between state-sponsored hate speech. In other words, when the government does, I think it would obviously be completely unacceptable if the government of Canada was to engage in anti-Semitism or the like. But I think, and also I think there's a big difference between such expressions in a country such as China, which is not a liberal and established liberal democracy such as Canada, which Canada fortunately is. I think, you know, today I went to the to the War Museum here in Ottawa, and I learned, I didn't know that there had been internment of Ukrainians and Germans here in Canada, and also Japanese. And I think, and one of the people, one of the Japanese Canadians talked about, you know, the hatred that they felt. And I think, you know, when the government, you know, designates a specific group as a danger, that is much more dangerous than if a private individual does so. I'm glad to bring up the example of shouting fire in a crowded theater, because that's a famous from Oliver Wendell Jones, I think. But the case where he used that example is one where he found that the government could actually prosecute and convict a person for being opposed to the draft. And to me, that's a good example why you should be extremely careful with these examples. And I think the reason why in the U.S. the First Amendment has been developed to be near absolute on viewpoints is because it has been abused to previously, you know, socialists, communists, feminists have actually previously been successfully convicted for their opinions, and so the U.S. Supreme Court heightened the standards in the 60s. And I think it's quite interesting when you look at the statistics. For instance, Americans' attitude to race. In 1958, 4% of Americans were in favor of or acceptant of interracial marriages. Today, it's something like 90%, especially amongst young people. And that has happened while free speech has been, the protection has gone up. So I don't, and I don't know that there's any good empirical evidence showing that if you allow even hate speech, that will result in, for instance, in more hate crimes. It's interesting that in Europe, where you have hate speech laws that are often very severely enforced, that's where you see, you know, the worst far-right countries. That's where you see a rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim sentiments against Roma, and so on. So I think it's more important to counter hatred through debate and free speech. That you could perhaps say that freedom of expression in a liberal democracy has a built-in safety valve, you could say, against hatred.
Joseph,
we have. Does it work? Yes. So we have 4 microphones, well, no, 3 microphones here, just passing around. By the way, if I cough when I make any remarks, it's allergies, guys. It's not a cold, so I'm not giving anyone. So you can continue to use my microphone, although I'm happy to hog it if you want. I have I won't say the singular privilege, but let me just say that I'm one of the very few, I think, Jews in this country who has worked inside the Jewish establishment. And David, I don't know if you remember when I used to work for B'nai B'rith, which as an organization, of course, is a very big supporter of human rights laws, etc. I stuck out like a sore thumb because I personally wasn't a very big supporter of them, and I've from time to time gotten myself into a little bit of controversy with my friends in the community, because when I'm asked to speak about these issues, I generally take the position that, as Jacob has articulated, that the kind of laws that we have that limit free speech and that are for the best of reasons, I want to stress, are implemented to protect minorities, have the opposite effect. And I don't want to get into that too much right now. Just let me say from more of a principle or philosophical point of view, I think it's important to remember that that laws prescribing hate speech as a means of protecting minorities, okay, and ensuring that they're not subjected to violence or the growth of violence, those laws are predicated on the belief that if individual citizens are exposed to this kind of hate speech, that they're going to be influenced negatively, and that somehow or other within that society where this speech is being tolerated, there's going to be the growth of a nucleus of intolerant people, and eventually this is going to have negative consequences for whomever this hate speech was directed against. And the Nazis, of course, and Nazi Germany is the principal example of this that's been brought forward. And I take very much an opposite view about the lessons of the rise of the Nazis and the relationship to the Jews and anti-Semitism that most people, I think, do, and certainly in my community. I'm going to set that aside. I'm happy to make a few remarks about it in a minute. But just on this, I have to say that really the idea that the only way